So I think it's important that we restore our full permanent fund dividend. The main thing that I would have to say is that as far as the binding caucus and things like that go, the binding caucus is a bad deal for Alaska if you look at it, especially for procedural and budget votes. And as you look at the budget in a way, by shuffling half of the earnings away, is restricting what earnings that you would have as for full permanent fund dividend. So I think that's important. Everything the left does seems to cut in half what really needs to be done. You look at what's happened to the private sector. Well, the public sector didn't shut down much recently as we've gone through these shutdowns. And I think that was a misstep there. I think there should have been a lot more. I think everybody's job is essential. And I think that's something that has to be done. We have to protect the private sector. We have to stand up and we have to let the people know that it's not, this is something that we need to protect as the private sector. So by having a full permanent fund dividend, you're protecting the private sector. If you look at the Hammond 50-50 plan, that's an important thing because Hammond's idea protects the private sector in a way that 50% of our invested earnings, because we are invested in our economy, we are invested in our natural resource development, and that's something that I believe is essential for growing and protecting the citizens of Alaska, is being able to develop our natural resources. And the regulations that are in place, we need to take half of them away. We need to look at what Donald Trump has done, reducing regulations. We can do the same thing in the state of Alaska. I think that's also an important thing. I know I cut my introduction short, but I have 5 boys. They've all graduated from the Wasilla schools. I've had one that was a valedictorian, and I had one that was a National Merit Scholar. So I've been invested in the schools. I taught school in Southeast Alaska for a year, so I got to see how I was a non-union. I was working on an interim license, and so I got to teach the middle school for most of the school year. I also taught the grade school for a little bit. So I know kind of how important education is, so that's an important thing that we have to look at as well. And I know the costs of education are extremely high in many ways. And we did a 4-day school week then. So these adjusted schedules and things that they're looking at going into the next school year are something that I've seen on a personal basis because I taught during a 4-day school week. So the two things, the two bills, one was what is it, HBSB? SGR. No, for the oil. Oil tax, Prop 1. Yeah, I am against Prop 1 because it restricts the growth of the private sector. And I think that's an important thing to look at, is how the private sector is able to grow. And the other bill was jungle primary. Okay, jungle primary. Yeah, I think that's a bad bill. You can even look at what's happening in Anchorage with how the Democrats want everything to be mail-in. And mail-in, we know, is the most fraudulent, just like Medicaid. Medicaid has high fraudulent activity, and it's something that has to be looked at closely. Since we expanded Medicaid, that's been a huge problem, is how much it's cost the state. Over $1 billion, there goes your PFD. I think that's an important thing that we have to look at. We have to look at a person's voting record, of course. The key to looking at the voting record is, okay, yeah, there's a binding caucus. The binding caucus is not a good thing, by the way. It totally affects how one votes. Okay, there's a pregame, there's a postgame. Well, if you know the postgame score, and you're basically, it's a quid pro quo system, essentially, when you go in and you look at how that affects people's voting and what they do. Because, yeah, you can vote on a bill, and guess what? That bill is now going to go into committee, and it could be changed. So what you voted for is going to be changed, and that's a problem. And so I'm definitely against the binding caucus. And one of the bills that I would be most in support of going putting forward is SB 26 is repealing it. Because you repeal SB 26, you're actually helping the people of Alaska and the private sector by ensuring that there's a full permanent fund dividend. You're not disregarding half the earnings at any point in time. You're actually paying the people to invest, and we need to invest in the private sector. So that's an important thing. When you invest in the private sector, invest in the natural resources, you're going to grow jobs. And that's one of the biggest things that we need right now is we need to strengthen the private sector. So the other bill that I would put forward is, there's a whole bunch of good ones. I would support most of the good ones. I would support changing the way we have our judges and how that's put forth. So we don't want the legal system to be overrun by private attorneys. So I think that's an important thing as well. And let's see, did I hit everything?
Yes,
Okay, and I'll just follow up for a minute on, anyways, so those are the two things. Restore the private sector, just as on my sign, we want to restore Alaska, restore the private sector, and full PFDs. I think that's one of the critical things going back to Hammond 50/50 plan.